There were countless theories about Jeffrey Epstein. Some believed he was dead, while others insisted he had staged his own death and was still alive. Yet everything said about his private island seemed insignificant compared to the truth about the man himself. The documentary opens with footage from one of Epstein's depositions. He is asked directly whether he sexually exploited underage girls, but Epstein refuses to answer, calmly invoking his constitutional right to remain silent. Then he is asked another question. How many times did he try to persuade underage girls to take part in those acts? His response never changes. In the same cold tone, he repeats that he will not answer. As the questioning continues, it becomes clear that he is no longer even trying to defend himself. He simply hides behind the law, repeating the same line again and again. Eventually, while the investigators keep pressing him, Epstein grows bored, abruptly ends the session, and walks out, leaving behind even more questions than answers. After that, the documentary goes back to the beginning, introducing the underage girls, whose stories would eventually expose the truth. They were the spark that brought everything into the open after they finally decided to speak about what Jeffrey Epstein had done to them. One of the first people to talk about him was journalist Vicky Ward, who describes him as a strange and mysterious man. Out of nowhere, he seemed to appear as an incredibly wealthy billionaire with powerful connections to celebrities, politicians, and influential people. He was always surrounded by beautiful young girls, yet he had never been married. Vicky continues, saying that the deeper she looked into Epstein's life, the more suspicious she became. At first, she had simply been assigned to write an article about his life story, but what disturbed her most was that every beautiful girl around him seemed to be underage. From that moment on, Vicky Ward decided she would no longer write a simple article. She was going to investigate everything connected to him. The documentary then introduces Maria Farmer, who tells her story herself. Maria says she was working as an artist, and one day she was exhibiting her paintings in a gallery when Jeffrey Epstein arrived with Ghislaine Maxwell. Epstein admired her paintings, even though they had already been sold. But then the gallery owner came to Maria and pressured her to sell them to him instead. She had sold the paintings for $12,000, but they asked her to cancel the sale and give them to Epstein for only $6,000. When she refused, the gallery owner told her that everyone did what Epstein wanted, and that she should do the same if she wanted to keep showing her work there. In the end, Maria reluctantly agreed because she knew how powerful he was. With time, she realized that Epstein had never really cared about the paintings. He was testing her, trying to see whether she would be afraid or whether she would submit. Before leaving, he looked at her and said, "Don't worry, I'll make up for your loss at the right time." At the time, Maria had no idea what he meant. 3 months later, Jeffrey Epstein called Maria Farmer and told her he had found a way to repay her. He offered her a job managing his house, with a salary far beyond anything she had ever imagined. Tempted by the offer, Maria accepted and went to work for him. At first, nothing seemed unusual, but Epstein soon became interested in her drawings, especially those that reflected details of her family. One day, he noticed a sketch of Maria's younger sister. He stared at it for a long time, then began asking questions about her, how old she was, what she looked like, and where she lived. That was when Maria began to feel that his interest was not innocent. He was not looking at the drawing itself. He was interested in her sister. Then he asked her to bring the girl to him, claiming he wanted to help with her education. The documentary then turns to Annie Farmer. Annie says that at first, she was happy to have Epstein in her life. He treated her like a father and often helped her financially. But one day, he asked her to give him a massage. When she entered the room, she was shocked to find him naked. At first, she did not fully understand what was happening, but she felt deeply uncomfortable. Then he asked her to take off her clothes too. That was the moment she ran straight back to her room. What frightened her even more was that all of this happened while Ghislaine Maxwell was in the house. The next day, Annie Farmer tried every possible way to leave. She says she was disturbed by how desperately they wanted her to stay, even though she kept inventing excuses to leave. In the end, she managed to escape what she later called that house of horror. As soon as Maria Farmer learned what had happened, she took her sister and went to report it. But no one seemed to care. No one took them seriously. Then they went to a federal agent, who at first seemed very interested in the case. But suddenly, without explanation, he stopped investigating. That was when the sisters became convinced that someone much more powerful had stepped in. This was not simply a case about a rich man. It was something much bigger. These were the first two girls whose stories Vicky Ward heard, but when she wrote about them, she was shocked to find that her editor had removed almost everything. Then he told her there had been clear threats, and that publishing those details could destroy everyone involved. Years passed after Vicky's investigation before people learned that Jeffrey Epstein had moved to Palm Beach, an exclusive town for the wealthy. But there, the neighbors began noticing strange things. They kept seeing young girls entering his house. Eventually, some of them filed formal complaints. This time, the police actually responded, but they could not prove anything because the girls they found were above the legal age. That was in 2003. In 2005, a detective named Joseph Recaray decided to keep investigating on his own. It began when the grandmother of a young girl came to him and said she had found her granddaughter with a large amount of cash. When she asked where it came from, the girl replied, "Uncle Jeffrey gave it to me because I gave him a massage." In the documentary, one of Recaray's colleagues tells the story for him because the detective died years ago. The film then returns to the original investigation as the girl describes what happened. When Recaray asked whether Jeffrey Epstein had asked her to remove her clothes, she said yes. At that point, the pattern became clear. Epstein was offering girls money in exchange for a massage. Many of them agreed because to the girls, the money seemed enormous. But then he would gradually push them into something much worse. What frightened that girl most was her claim that Epstein began performing sexual acts in front of her while she was massaging him. From then on, more and more reports began to surface. The documentary then focuses on one of the victims, Michelle Licata. Michelle remembers being a cheerful child, living happily with her family, until one day a girl she knew told her she could make a lot of money by going with her to meet a man who wanted a massage. Michelle agreed and went to Epstein's mansion. As soon as she arrived, she was left alone. At first, everything seemed normal. She simply began the massage, but after a few minutes, Epstein started making strange and frightening requests. Michelle says she was very young at the time. She wore braces and had little confidence in herself. Looking back, she believes Epstein saw that weakness and used it to make her obey him. She says she was terrified and felt that if she refused, something bad might happen. So she did what he wanted, just hoping it would end and she could leave. Then she breaks down, saying that before Epstein, she was one person, and afterward, she became someone else entirely. Something inside her died. She was shattered and could no longer even look at herself in the mirror. At the same time, Recaray kept asking himself one question: how had this girl reached Epstein in the first place? That was when Joseph Recaray began to suspect that other girls were working for Jeffrey Epstein, bringing him new victims. The documentary then moves to another girl who had run away from home. Recaray says she was in an extremely difficult situation. She had nowhere to go and no money, and suddenly found herself inside one of the grandest houses in Palm Beach. The girl says she went there for a massage, but was shocked when Epstein began making the same disturbing requests. In the end, she agreed because she was afraid he would not let her leave if she refused. She also desperately needed the money, but after she finally got out, she felt as though she had escaped with her life. Despite her fear, she admits that she returned to Epstein 3 or 4 more times, only because she needed the money. The regret is obvious on her face as she speaks. She says that if she had still been living with her family, she never would have made that choice. And like so many others, another girl had been the one who persuaded her to go. As Recaray continued his investigation, he found one of the employees who worked inside Epstein's mansion. The employee said the massages happened twice a day, once in the morning and once at night. When Recaray asked whether the girls coming to the house were underage, especially since Epstein kept a list of his favorite girls, the employee refused to answer. But eventually, the police found more victims, and their stories were all strikingly similar. One of them was Haley Robson, who gave more details. She said that the first time she entered Epstein's house, she did not go through the main entrance. She was taken through a side door. The hallway inside was lined with photographs of naked children, and from the first moment, She felt frightened and uneasy. Then she entered the room and found Epstein waiting for his massage. She says Jeffrey Epstein was naked, just like those in the photographs on the walls. When he began asking for more, she refused. But he told her she did not have to do anything herself. If she brought him other girls, he would pay her instead. He offered $200 for each girl. So Haley Robson spent a year working for him, bringing him more girls and telling them only that he wanted a massage. Soon, some of those girls began recruiting others too. In the end, Haley admitted she had brought Epstein 24 girls. That was when the investigators realized this was not just one man, it was an entire network. Haley also says that during questioning, people treated her like an accomplice rather than a victim. She kept asking, why was she being blamed? But not the girl who had first brought her to Epstein. The documentary then returns to Joseph Recaré, who says the police finally got a warrant to search Epstein's house. Inside, they found a letter Epstein had forgotten to hide. It was from a girl saying she could no longer work for him. That letter led them to another girl who knew both Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. And this time, the story was even worse. The girl says Maxwell herself encouraged her to learn more, promising she could make a lot of money. But she was not meant to work only for Epstein. They planned to send her to other wealthy, powerful men like him. When she realized what they wanted, she tried to refuse. They threatened her, saying the police were on their side, and that if she spoke up, she could disappear. She was terrified. Soon after, she vanished completely. The documentary then returns to the case itself. After years of work, Recaré finally handed all the evidence to prosecutors, convinced there was enough to put Epstein away for good. Instead, everyone was shocked when Epstein received an incredibly lenient deal. Rather than being punished, he was treated as if he had done almost nothing. That was when investigators realized someone powerful was protecting him. The documentary then briefly goes back to Jeffrey Epstein's early life. As a young man, he seemed ordinary. He lived a normal life and went to school, though he was never an exceptional student. Later, he became a teacher, but complaints soon began to surface about the way he behaved around young girls, and eventually, he had to leave the school. After that, he met the father of one of his students and convinced him to hire him in finance. That was how Epstein entered the world of money and power, despite having no real qualifications. The documentary says that even when he was young, Epstein was always drawn to girls much younger than himself. It also claims that he falsified his credentials to get a job at a girls' school. Still, the man who hired him believed Epstein was clever and charismatic and ignored his background. Over the years, Epstein became richer and built a network of powerful friends. The documentary then introduces two new investigators who took over the case after the first detectives had run into too many obstacles. They tried to persuade the victims to speak publicly on camera, but many of the girls received threats from Epstein or people close to him. The message was clear: anyone who talked would suffer. Even so, some of them finally began to speak. The documentary then explores how Epstein built his fortune. It points to Alan Greenberg of Bear Stearns, the man who first taught him about investing and finance. But after learning everything he could, Epstein betrayed him. Later, another businessman appears and says the greatest mistake of his life was trusting Epstein. Finally, the documentary turns to Les Wexner, founder of Victoria's Secret, and describes his relationship with Epstein as deeply strange. Les Wexner did not just give Jeffrey Epstein money. He gave him enormous control over his business and trusted him with a huge part of his fortune. Because of that, Epstein became richer and more powerful than ever. The documentary says Epstein eventually became Wexner's greatest weakness. He seemed to know exactly how to manipulate him. During one deposition, Epstein was questioned about Wexner and their relationship, but his answers were vague and evasive. Later, Wexner himself appears and says that the greatest regret of his life was ever knowing Epstein. Even then, the investigators did not stop. They tried to build a new case in which the girls would appear only as witnesses, not as accomplices. But as soon as Epstein learned about it, many of the girls began to feel they were being watched. Some said strange cars followed them. Others received threats. Terrified, many backed away. Then, in the middle of all that frustration, Virginia Giuffre decided to sue Epstein publicly. But even that led nowhere at first because of his influence. The documentary then introduces another victim, a woman named Slan. She says that when she first met Epstein, she was thrilled. He promised to take her on his private jet to his private island, but the moment she boarded the plane, she realized something was terribly wrong. She says she saw Epstein behaving in a shocking way in front of his guests, while everyone pretended not to notice. That was when she understood she had entered a completely different world, and when she reached the island, it was even worse. There were powerful, wealthy men everywhere. She says more than one of them sexually abused her, though she never names them. When she tried to escape, Epstein told her that the entire island was covered with cameras and that he would know wherever she went. The documentary reveals that the island was not just Epstein's retreat. Many girls were there, and some felt as if they were trapped. One of the girls says Jeffrey Epstein sometimes forced them to take photographs that looked like happy family pictures, so everything would seem normal if rumors spread. Another girl says she was only 14 when she met him. Epstein promised to pay for her education and help her travel and study, but in return, he and others exploited her. She remembers one night when she saw men arguing over her. When she tried to run away, Epstein caught her and silenced her with money and threats, just as he had done with many others. The documentary then reaches the girl who finally decided not to stay silent. She had known Epstein years earlier, then disappeared from his life. But after some time, Epstein contacted her again. This time, the shock was even greater. He and Ghislaine Maxwell asked her to have a child for them, then give them the baby. Pretending to agree, she said she first wanted to travel to Thailand to study. Once she was far away, she began to see her life differently. Eventually, she called Epstein and told him she had married. To her surprise, he became furious, as if he believed she belonged to him. Years later, a journalist asked her to speak publicly. This time, she refused to stay silent. The girl was Virginia Giuffre. She told the world what had happened and said that Prince Andrew was one of the men who sexually abused her. She also accused one of Epstein's lawyers of sexually abusing her several times. Yet despite the accusations, Jeffrey Epstein escaped punishment for years because of legal deals and the powerful people protecting him. Public anger grew, especially after the prosecutor who once helped him became an important figure in government. As the pressure increased, the case was reopened. This time, Epstein could not escape. He was arrested, and investigators discovered that he had kept photographs and recordings of powerful men who visited him, almost as if he had been collecting leverage against them. New charges were filed against him, serious enough to keep him in prison for the rest of his life. But before the trial began, Epstein was found dead in his cell. Authorities ruled it a suicide. Many people refused to believe that, and theories quickly spread that someone had killed him to keep certain names from being exposed. Even though the medical examiner insisted Epstein had taken his own life, the doubts never disappeared. As for Virginia Giuffre's accusations against Prince Andrew, the case ended in a major settlement after it became clear that her story could not be dismissed. Since then, many of Epstein's victims have continued speaking publicly, determined to reveal everything they know about the people who visited his island. Because as they say, the full truth has still not come out.